Hey everybody, it's Josie. Welcome back to Cedar Creek Homestead. I hope you guys are doing great, that you've had a wonderful day. It's been extremely windy here for the last 2 days. In fact, here in Oklahoma, there's been several places that have had some fires get started just because the conditions have all came together at the right time along with the wind. And I don't know what the reasoning was, but there were some fires that got out of control. And so this morning, our local rural fire department chief, he sent out a text just reminding everybody that the conditions were ripe in this area for that, and that we didn't want to do any kind of burning or anything that would cause any trouble for us. And so far, I haven't heard of anybody having any kind of problems with fires in the area. We're under the gun tonight after midnight, I think. Yeah, after midnight, for some severe thunderstorms, and then tomorrow it's supposed to be cooler, and even a little bit of chance of flurries. Howie's sister and her daughter they live in Missouri, and they, I think, are supposed to get 4 to 6 inches of snow on Thursday, tomorrow. And they're going to come down this way and visit for the weekend. So we're excited to see them and spend some time with them. And if we can just make it through this nasty weather. And I'm a big chicken, and so I'm hoping that it won't get too rough. It's bad enough when it storms during the day, but to me it's even worse at night when you get woke up and to storms. However, I'm going into it knowing that we're expecting storms, and I have all of my stuff in place, my flashlights and all of those things, just in case we have to go to storm shelter. I don't think they're expecting a big tornado outbreak, but they are expecting some chance of some straight line winds, and even that can damage. We have a neighbor has property that's located right next to ours. There is a dirt road that separates our garden from their property, and they still have a lot of tree damage from when the tornado went through just a few months back. And you can really see it now that it's had weight on it from the snow and the sleet and stuff. And some of the branches are really beginning to break and to fall, and some of them have fell across the fence on their side of the road. And then we have two trees that's on our property that still need to be finished cleaning up. The most dangerous parts are gone, but there's still a few little limbs that need to be taken care of. And I have a feeling that some of that will probably come down with this wind from yesterday and the wind today and into tonight. Those trees on his property, I feel like the limbs that are broken off will go ahead and fall. It is a wooded property, so there's not any chance of doing any kind of property damage or anybody being harmed by the branches falling down. They're not going to hit anybody's houses or their vehicles or anything like that, so that's a good thing. But anyway, we do have chance for that. Now, those of you that know me, you are probably saying, hey, Josie, this is Wednesday, not Tuesday. And I know that. But you guys know how it is when you get busy with something and you look up and you realize that more time has passed than what you expected for it to lapse, and then you have ran out of time to do the thing that was your next project. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. We got caught up in a big project here on the farm, and I just simply couldn't get away from it. And so I'm bringing this to you today. It's a day late, but I'm hoping that you'll enjoy our time together. I'm in my bedroom tonight. It's just too windy to sit on the porch. It's not cold. It's the weather, or the temperature itself, is nice. It's in the 60s. But it's just entirely too windy, and not only would it pick up on the sound, but my hair would be all over the place, and you guys would have a good laugh out of that. So I thought we'd just spend a little bit of time here in the bedroom. Out in the living room, baby Howie has had a bottle, and he was asleep, but he's woke up, and he's a little bit fussy today, and so I decided to sneak off in here and do this video. My question to you would be, what is your motivation? What motivates you to get things done? Have you ever thought about that? What motivates you? I started thinking about my family and how we have all of these different jobs or chores or things that we try to do, and that we're all seem to be responsible for different things and to make sure that they get done. And then comparing that to how it was when I was a kid. And it seems like a lot of the things that are going on today, at least in terms of inflation and those things that are going on, it seems like we're taking a trip back to that. And I got to thinking about how it was when I was a young child. Now, I was born in 1970, and I grew up in the 70s and the early 80s. I graduated high school in 88. So the 70s and the 80s were my growing up years. And what I remember is a lot of happy times, but I remember a lot of times where things were pretty thin as far as having any kind of money. And it seemed like it wasn't just my parents, my family, but those around us, my friends of my parents, were all in the same boat. So we kind of all just, I don't know that it was that we didn't know that we didn't have any money, that we were kind of poor, or just everybody that we were acquainted with was in the same shoes. And so it wasn't really that big of a deal to us. I remember very vividly my mother, and she was a stay-home mom. But I remember her every week when it was time for my stepdad to get his paycheck. My mom would have a notebook out with paper, and she would start making columns. And she would write down her bills, and she would write out how much she owed. And she would figure all that up and what that total would be. And then on the next column, she might redo all of that and take one of the bills out and substitute another bill in and see what she came up with that. And she would have a whole page of figures. And she worked and worked and worked, trying to figure out a plan for them to make ends meet. That's really what she was doing, even though we didn't understand at the time that that's what she was doing. Now, in all of this planning that she would do, she would get the paper from my step-grandma. The Wednesday paper would have all of the sales ads in for the local grocery stores. And she would begin to make a list of all of the things that she thought that she needed to stock her pantry, and usually most of the things were on sale. And she would have, for instance, we had a Safeway, and so she would write down all of the things that were on sale at Safeway. And then she would write down Phillips and all of the foods that were on sale at Phillips, and on, all the different grocery stores that she would be going to, and the things that they had on sale. Now, of course, back in those days, Walmart was not a super center, so they didn't have a big grocery line, so she depended on going to the grocery stores. And they were all, for us, and we lived in a rural area, but there were enough grocery stores, I would say probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 that she would go to that were in a relatively short distance of each other, within, I don't know, a mile or two, some of them within driving distance to each other, and some of them maybe even closer. And so it wasn't that she was driving all over creation trying to get the best deal, but she would go over and over and over her list. And then she would go on Friday evening grocery shopping with my stepdad, or on Saturday mornings she would get up and she would go with her friend, and they would go yard selling. And it was usually a half a day or all day affair that they would go yard selling. And then at the finish of their yard selling, they would go and they would get their groceries, and then she would be back home. And it was a way for her to have an outing and enjoy the day being with her friend. And that's another way that she made ends meet, was not only did she shop for bargains with the groceries, but she went to those yard sales. Now, my mom, if she saw value in something at a yard sale, she would get it. And she would get sheets and pillowcases. I was 28 when my mom passed away, oldest of her children. but all of us were married and were starting families, and she still had shelves over her washer and dryer that were just full of sheets and pillowcases and bed sets that she had purchased at yard sales. And if they were good, they were in good condition, she didn't pass those up because she knew through the years she was able to make the budget stretch a little bit more by looking for those kind of things. She would get sheets and pillowcases, our clothes. She knew all of our sizes, and so, jeans and shirts, t-shirts for the boys, and socks and tennis shoes. She just did everything that she could to make ends meet, to help stretch the budget. It motivated her to make sure that she looked well to the ways of her household, making sure that we were going to be taken care of with groceries and we were going to be taken care of with our clothing. Something else that she did was garden, and we all know that there's a renewed interest in gardening. People are going back to that, and we're thankful for that, that people are beginning to get an interest in growing the things that they eat and getting back to those ways, learning to can and to preserve, learning to dehydrate. A lot of people have freeze dryers. I do not have a freeze dryer. I can't say I won't ever get a freeze dryer, but right now that's just something that is on the shelf for me, and that's okay. There's lots of other ways to put up food. Something else that I remember growing up was that things were not always available for us. Now, I didn't grow up in the Depression era. I grew up in the 70s, but times were tough for my family, and one thing that we were not allowed to waste was school paper. And that seems ridiculous now. It seems crazy. I've got more spiral notebooks and loose leaf notebook paper, and I don't even have any kids in school. I have paper laying around all the time if I want to doodle, and I'm a doodler when I'm on the phone. I am usually, writing and drawing and my grandma was that way. I have recipes of hers that she had little doodled characters on, and I do the same thing. But when I was growing up, we were not allowed to use our school paper for that. You could, if you got caught making paper airplanes, or you got caught wasting your school paper, you got in trouble. And it wasn't because my parents didn't want us to have fun. It's because they simply just didn't have the extra money to buy any more school paper. We had to make it last for as long as possible. I can remember coming home from school having used the last of my spiral notebook. You have all the different subjects in school, and you would use that subject notebook, that spiral notebook for whatever particular class, and it would be used up, and it would be time that I would need a new folder, a new spiral notebook, and I would just hate to come home and have to tell my parents that I needed that, because I knew that it was hard for them to come up with the money to buy a spiral notebook. I can remember times, and I know people will laugh about this and not believe it's true, but I can remember all of us going around the house looking everywhere to find enough dimes and nickels and quarters and sometimes even pennies to put together to buy pencils or whatever it was that we were needing for school. The beginning of the school year was always one of our favorite times, even though it was the end of summer and it was back to the books. But the beginning of the school year always got us excited to think that we were going to be getting new school supplies, and usually a new wardrobe and new shoes. Now, it wasn't a lot of clothes, and it wasn't 4, 5, 6 pairs of shoes. It was usually for my brothers. They usually got a couple pairs of jeans and enough shirts to have for the week, and socks and underwear and a pair of shoes. Same for me, same for my sister, and it wasn't extravagant, but once they got us going to school, my mom continued to do her going to yard sales. Y'all call them yard sales or garage sales? We call them yard sales, but it's all the same, I guess. It's just wherever it's located. Anyway, back to the story. My mom would continue with her yard selling, and she would get jeans and shoes. And I've shared with you before that a lot of times she would pick up things and she would clean them up, dolls and and trucks and all kinds of things that were put in the sale that people had, their children had decided they didn't want to play with anymore. And my mama would get it and clean it up and have it ready for a birthday or for Christmas. Howie and I both come from families that love to hunt and fish. Always going fishing and catching catfish and bass and crappie, hunting for deer and rabbit and squirrel. In fact, when I was growing up, you never really was sure what was in the stew pot. You just knew that there was food on the table and you better enjoy it or you were going to go to bed hungry. They didn't do it to be mean. It was a necessity. It was something they had to do to help get food on the table and to stretch their budget and their supplies. The truth of the matter is that our families, our parents and our grandparents, and most of you probably have some of those same experiences. In fact, some of you probably have parents and grandparents that were even older than mine, and so they really depended upon getting to work and doing things to make ends meet for themselves. They were motivated to take care of their families because they knew there wasn't anybody else going to do it. They had to do it. They had to do the work, and they had to hunt and to fish and to figure out how to pay their bills and to supply for their family. Now, my family burned wood. My stepdad cut firewood and also would sell firewood to make ends meet. And everyone in our family gardened. Now, my granny and grandpa had one of the best gardens that you could ever imagine. I loved walking barefooted through their garden. Now, I know they probably had rocks in their garden, but I don't remember it. I remember it being the most peaceful and the most beautiful garden that I had ever seen. And I would walk through there and enjoy spending time in the garden with Granny. And she was always humming and singing a song. And they grew a humongous garden. I got my dad a picture for Christmas this year of one of those. Remember when the company would go around and they would take aerial pictures of your farms, and then they would come around and they would try to get you to purchase those pictures. Well, I knew that my granny and grandpa had one of those pictures taken, and I hadn't seen it in a long, long time. And one day I was just goofing off on the computer, and I just happened to look at vintage aerial farm photos. And this company has purchased all of these airplane pictures that had been taken through the years, and you can go in on your state, just in case you're interested. You can go in on your state and you can go in on your county, and if you kind of know where your home or where your family home farm was located, you can kind of follow the flight path and you can actually find the roll of film that your particular picture may be on. And that's what I did, and was able to get that for my dad for Christmas, and I had it made into a big poster size picture. And the interesting thing was seeing Granny and Grandpa's farm and realizing how big their garden really was. They grew just about everything that they ate. And so they had a big potato patch, and they had a big sweet potato patch, and they had a great big old corn patch, and tomatoes and cucumbers, all those things. A beautiful, beautiful garden. And the first row of the garden was always zinnias. My granny loved zinnias. That was always the first row in the garden. But they too grew a garden because they were motivated by making sure that they were providing well for their families. They always grew a beautiful garden, and Granny worked hard. Her and her sister canned green beans on a wood cook stove. I cannot imagine how hot it must have been canning those green beans on a wood cook stove, but they did it. They did it for their families. They provided and looked well to the ways of their households. You can always guarantee that they had chickens running around. We always had rabbits and ducks and geese and turkeys, all of the familiar animals. I grew up on a dairy farm, and then my grandparents, my patent grandparents, had a hog farm, and so there was always meat available. There was always farm animals everywhere, and I'm thankful for that because it taught us where our food came from and what it takes to actually have those things that helps provide for your family and your well-being. Another area that my family was motivated to get involved in was gleaning, or going in and cleaning up in the fields, or even fruit trees and berry bushes where others were either done with what they were interested in harvesting, or they simply didn't want it. And they would glean fields of green beans, and I've picked more blueberries in my lifetime than I don't know what. But always picked blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. If anybody called and said, I've got some apple trees, are y'all interested? Well, we would load up. My parents would load us up, and there we'd go, and we'd pick those apples. Plums, any peaches, any of that kind of stuff. They saw the opportunity, and they were motivated to add to their pantry to help to stretch that budget. The point is, my family, my parents, they had dreams just like everyone else. They knew they had a big family, 7 kids at one time under their roof. And times were tough. But they had to make ends meet. There wasn't any place for them to jump off. They weren't expecting the government to give to them. My parents didn't seek the government out for help. They tried their best to help themselves, and they worked really hard and made ends meet. My dad and my stepmom, they worked hard. They worked in the factories. My dad worked for Emerson's, and my stepmom worked for Glad there in Rogers, and my mama stayed home, and my stepdad was a builder. And they all worked hard, and they all sought to make ends meet for us kids. And I'm thankful that we had parents that were like that. I'm thankful that I grew up with grandparents that did all that they could do to teach us to grow gardens, to can and to put up. My mama and my step-granny would work and put up apples. They would pick apples, and we would have so many apples, and they would peel apples, and they would can them so that in the wintertime, before we went to school, we always had a hot meal, and we were hardly ever sick. We hardly ever missed school because of being sick. But Mama made sure that we had a hot meal before we went to school. Now, sometimes we'd have a baked apple, or we would have half a grapefruit. Of course, I know that's not a hot meal, but we would have hot tea and oatmeal. We didn't get a lot of sugary cereals and that kind of stuff. There wasn't a whole lot of processed foods. We got homegrown food or home processed food, and it was healthy for us. And we went outside and we played, and we got home from school. We went and played and ran and played ball. We were healthy kids. And I appreciate my family for looking well to their household. Our parents and grandparents were motivated by the fact that they had to depend, number one, on God for everything, and number two, they had to depend on themselves. We've talked about this before about working. You know, we have to get up and we have to go to work. They were motivated to do that because of the love for their family. They wanted to see their family survive and thrive. I would think that nobody wants to hear their baby cry. It breaks my heart. It breaks Cheyenne's heart when baby Howie cries because he's hungry, and that he's just going from bottle to bottle. I can't imagine not being able to feed your child for days at a time. But folks, down through history, in this country as well as other countries, there have been times that babies and children have cried and went to bed hungry because there wasn't any food. I'm glad that our parents and grandparents were motivated to do the things that they had to do to make ends meet. So I'm asking you today, what motivates you? What motivates you to get up and face the day? To pull yourself up by the bootstraps and be about business Is it your family? Is it love for your family? Is it so that you can be independent? We all want to be self-sustaining. That's a goal, but in all honesty, I know that there are things that we simply can't provide here in the homestead for ourselves. We can grow lots of things, but there's things, just part of just simply being where we are in this nation, as far as growing conditions and stuff. I cannot supply every single thing that I need, but I can work really hard to provide the things that my family needs here, and use my money and my resources to purchase the things that we cannot provide for ourselves. Now, I'm no economist, I'm no expert, but I would say that the time is now for us to be motivated to get up and to get busy. If you look at all of the things that are going on, the news that you hear of inflation and supply chain issues, and I know that it seems like we keep harping on these things, but it's because it's time to work now while we have the opportunity, because a day's coming when we won't be able to work. Not that we're trying to scare anyone, not that we're trying to be fearmongers, but we're just trying to motivate you to get up and do something. Now's the time. I don't honestly know how bad everything's going to get. Let's be motivated to work really hard so that we don't have to endure the cries of hungry babies. Let's be motivated that we can do all we can to get ahead of the debt. I would say that now is the time to be motivated to pick up some of those things that are considered old-fashioned. Get back to gardening and canning. Get back to raising some livestock. If you live in the city and or in a suburb and you're not allowed big livestock, perhaps they'll let you raise some rabbits or something that's quiet, something that wouldn't disturb your neighbors. I never thought that the little town that I grew up in, and it's not little anymore, it's had quite a growth population, but that little town, it no longer allows you to have chickens in the city limits. And I would have never, ever dreamed that in a million years. Things are changing. It's changing all around us, and we want to make sure that we provide well for our families. So let's be motivated to get to work. Let's be motivated to be about our business. Don't get mired down. Sometimes we can absolutely take so much in at one time that it overwhelms us. One bite at a time, one step at a time. Make your list of all the supplies that you're going to need, the things that your family eats. Make sure that you add water to it. Get your first aid supplies. Get you some manuals. If you don't know how to do something, get you some hands-on books and manuals. And let's be motivated to take care of our families, look well to the ways of our household, and love our neighbors around us. If we see somebody struggling and they don't know how to garden, or they don't know how to hunt and fish, or they don't know how to sew, or whatever it is that would be a skill for them to be able to use, maybe perhaps to barter with, maybe you'll be motivated to teach them how to do some of those things. Because in all honesty, the more of your family and your friends that are in the know and they know how to do those things, well, then the better off that you'll be too, when your little community can all stand stronger, because they know how to do things, and because they have the tools and the ability and the knowledge to put it into play. So once again, before I close, I just want to ask you, what motivates you? I would say my family and my friends motivate me. And number one, the Lord motivates me. I want to be about the business that I'm called to do, namely encouraging each of you. And I hope that I have been successful with that, to encourage you to look well to the ways of your household and to be about His business. Well, guys, this is Josie. I love y'all. I really do. Sorry I'm a day late. And until next time, we're gone.